All right, afternoon of day 3 is our mini implementation. Yes, we still are doing this. Yes, student instances or the team instances still may have some performance issues. Guidance, please keep the teams to be relatively small. Once you get above like 3 or 4 people, they tend to slow down. You can use HTTP versus HTTPS to speed things up a bit, but please be aware of the potential issues there. You should spin up mini implementation instances like a 1 to 3 or 1 to 4 ratio. Put in an instructor instance if you're the one scheduling these. That way you can have teams use the lab reservation link to kind of reserve their dev and test pairs of instances. There's a lot less configuration on these instances, but there is a working app repo that will work for both global and scoped applications. Everything works, so students can deploy their code. Let's see. Goals of this: practice planning and coordination in a team environment. We want students to do this, especially if they are remote. The majority of our deployments that we do are probably about 90% remote deployments. So I know that this is a lot easier in a classroom environment, but it's vitally important for virtual environments as well. Implement stories using skills learned in the class so far. There will be some stories that we have not covered. That's going to be a fact of life. You know, you're not going to walk into every deployment and only see stories that you've seen before. So you've got to use your common resources like docs, developer, and community to learn about some functionality that we may not have touched on in order to satisfy the requirements. We want students to package things into update sets and be ready to deploy them to the test platform. In future versions of the class, I think I will modify this so that at the end of each lab, we are deploying to a test environment to get a little bit more practice with that. Um, it's a tough thing to leave till the end. But this was a fairly significant rewrite to go from 5 days to 3 days, and we didn't have the app repos until after the content was developed. So I have some slides in here. The books have just a kind of a lab guide for teams. They don't have these slides in there. So these are your instructor slides. Break into team, 2 to 4 people max per team. Make sure that they've got some virtual teaming tools. We've had a lot of success using Adobe with the breakout rooms for that. We did that at our last beta and it was fantastic and fairly easy to use, but it does take practice on your part. Determine a team leader to act as the Scrum Master. I've cut down the times that we have for Sprint 1 and Sprint 2 to just 1 hour. I think we had 90 minutes before in that. It's important that we have 2 sprints. It's not so important that we get through everything in here. So it's just that practice and that cadence that we're going for. Preparation, Scrum Master, reserve the instance, make sure that we've got an audio bridge, share the instance information with teams, create user accounts, add the users to the students group. You should see all of the stories in the mini implementation release and start planning. I have seen one instance where the dev instance did not have stories loaded. I don't know what happened there with the configuration, but always spin up an extra instance or two just in case that happens. Have students check to see that they've got a backlog in there right after reserving the instance. We go through Sprint 1 planning, do Sprint 1. I've got stand-up meeting questions in there. Make sure that they do that at least once. Retrospective, Sprint 2, retrospective, Sprint 2 review, which is optional depending on how you're doing in class and your preferences, and then have students try to migrate their code and their data to the test instance. In most cases, this will fail miserably, or they'll have forgotten to capture some of their stuff. but it's a good learning opportunity to do this in a class versus in front of a customer. Finally, we've got our mini implementation recap, which is fairly close to the finish line for the course.